All right, Ronan MMA, welcome back to the channel. Now, UFC 302, Makhachev versus Dustin Poirier takes place this Saturday, and I'm here to give my picks and a brief preview for every single fight on the card. We will start with the first fight of the night and work our way up, and as usual, I try to go through some of these earlier fights a little bit faster so I can spend more time on the main event, the co-main event, and things like that. Okay, so let us get started right away with the first fight of the night, which is Mitch RAPOSO versus Andre Lima. Okay, now I am going to be going with Andre Lima. Mitch RAPOSO stepping up on very short notice from Cage Titans, making his UFC debut. Now, I was going to go with Andre Lima to beat his previously scheduled opponent as well. And while Mitch RAPOSO has a similar amount of experience in terms of record and overall number of fights, his experience is not nearly the same level of somebody like an Andre Lima. On Lima's record, you see a lot of decent opponents with pretty good records, whereas on RAPOSO's last opponent was like 4-2. He fought a guy that was like 7-4, like a bunch of pretty shitty records or very inexperienced guys that he has been fighting. Not to mention, Andre Lima has quite a bit of kickboxing experience before his MMA career as well, so his pro record in MMA doesn't necessarily reflect the level of experience that he actually has. Also, most of his wins by knockout. Okay, he got the DQ win last time out, obviously, for getting bit. He's never been submitted. He'll have a decent reach advantage, pardon me, so I think for the most part, he's just going to be able to kind of pick apart Mitch RAPOSO here, who, credit to him, as I said, stepping up on very short notice, but I will be going with Andre Lima to get this one done. Moving up the card, too, PEREZ versus Jocelyn Edwards. Okay, I'm going to go with PEREZ, I guess, dude. Honestly, anything could happen at this level of women's MMA, okay? But as I said, I will be going with PEREZ. Now, Jocelyn Edwards, in my opinion, should actually be on a 3-fight skid right now. She lost her last one, and then the 2 previous to that, she won split decisions, which I thought that she should have lost both of them. They were kind of robbery decisions, pardon me. Not to mention, she missed weight in both of those fights. So it's like you're giving yourself a massive advantage against girls that are already at a fairly low level, at least relative to women's MMA. And you can't even get the job done, hardly. Do you know what I mean? You've got to get gifted a decision. So I don't know that I can trust Jocelyn Edwards whatsoever. As I said, even with the weight advantage, she looked like shit against KOPYLOV. She looked like shit against, I can't remember, it was the Asian girl she fought before that, but either way, dude. While neither of them have a finish inside the UFC, I do kind of just trust PEREZ a little bit more to make it obvious, or at the very least more obvious, that she actually won a round, whereas Jocelyn Edwards seems to have issues with that, hence all the split decisions. Okay, so PEREZ by unanimous decision, or something like that. Moving up the card, to Mickey Gall versus Bassil HAFEZ. I'm going to be going with Bassil HAFEZ here. I think Mickey Gall is trash. And I'm not sure how this guy is still in the UFC, if we're being honest. Okay, the guy is going to be a 500 record pretty soon. Okay, he's like 7-5, right? Not to mention, bro, we just touched on it in the talking about the first fight of the night. The guy that got DQ'd for biting, right? He then lost his contract with the UFC. And I don't know if many people remember this, but Mickey Gall a few years back was getting the absolute shit beaten out of him by an old washed up Diego Sanchez, okay, who he then bit the tit of, and for whatever reason is still kicking it here in the UFC. I don't understand it, but either way, dude. Also, getting finished to Mike Malott has kind of aged poorly, considering Mike Malott's last performance, but, you know, it is what it is. Also, Bassil HAFEZ, I think he's going to be coming into the UFC on, like, this is not his debut, obviously. He came in and fought Jack Della Maddalena on very short notice, but it'll be his first fight in the UFC with a proper training camp. I think because he gave JDM such a competitive fight, he's probably going to have a lot of confidence going into this one, considering the step down in competition, right, compared to Jack Della Maddalena and Mickey Gall, night and day. Do you know what I mean? And while Mickey Gall can be dangerous on the ground, I just think that Bassil HAFEZ is going to be able to basically do whatever he wants to him. I just think Mickey Gall's not ever been that good, and I don't think I truly don't know how he's still in the UFC, and I'm not trying to be shitty about it, but Jesus Christ, dude. Bassil HAFEZ, I think, gets it done, potentially by TKO. All right, now moving up the card to Nico Price versus Alex Morono. I'm going Alex Morono all day here, okay? In the last 5 years, Nico Price has 1 win against James Vick, and then another decision victory over Cowboy Oliveira, but Alex Cowboy Oliveira, right? Now, I know he had that weird one with the other Cowboy, Donald Cerrone, in between there where he should have won, but he got points deducted, so it ended up being a draw or no contest or some weird shit, right? But in recent years, he's taken quite a few losses. Handful of them he's been finished, right? Including the last one out against Robbie Lawler, which was absolutely vicious and also didn't age that well considering how Robbie Lawler was actually doing towards the end of his career, right? Like, he was losing to guys that you wouldn't have ever expected to see him lose to. And then Nico Price was a heavy favorite going into that one. And Robbie Lawler just goes out there and starches him, okay? Whereas Morono still seems to be able to beat guys of a decent level. He can also be kind of tricky for a lot of these guys to deal with. His style's awkward. He's got way more experience despite actually being younger. Doesn't get finished a whole lot and is capable everywhere. So I'm going to go with Morono to win a unanimous decision over Nico Price. Moving up the card, dude. Phil Rowe versus Jake Matthews. I'm going to go with Jake Matthews here, but I'm going to be honest, dude. I'm a little concerned every time I pick Jake Matthews to get the job done, simply because I don't know what to call it, dude. A little bit chinny, maybe. He gets hurt a lot, and it's not like he's getting starched or, you know, put out cold or anything like that, but oftentimes in fights, he'll be looking very good. He'll be winning even, and then he'll get touched, he'll get dropped, he'll get wobbled, or what have you, and it ends up costing him the round. Do you know what I mean? But I think skill for skill, Jake Matthews is like just not even close to Phil Rowe. I think Jake Matthews is way more skilled than Phil Rowe, okay, who lost his last one out to Neil Magny, obviously. His last win was over Nico Price, but he missed weight when he beat Nico Price. As I said, Jake Matthews just concerns me sometimes, a little bit chinny, or at the very least gets hurt a bit, and, you know, because of that, he'll lose rounds that he shouldn't have, right? Just because his opponent simply had the more impactful moment. But I do think he should be able to get this one done. I don't think he'll get hurt in every round, and I think that he'll do enough to, at the very least, you know, win 2 out of the 3 rounds over Phil Rowe. Phil Rowe is kind of getting up there in age, isn't necessarily known as some, like, crazy knockout puncher, and I think that on the ground, Jake Matthews is actually a lot more skilled. Now, Phil Rowe is not an easy guy to finish, so I'm not going to hold it against him if he doesn't get the finish, but I could see Jake Matthews winning a decision. Moving up the card, Grant Dawson versus Joe Solecki. I'm going Grant Dawson here over Joe Solecki. Okay, he had a bad last fight, obviously. Went down, the first punch landed pretty much against Bobby Green, but still. Before that, guy hadn't lost since 2016. Beat guys like Damir Ismagulov and Julian Erosa relatively easily, or at the very least, like, pretty dominantly, right? Like, they weren't close fights by any stretch. Also, Joe Solecki seems to not be at all a knockout threat at all, which is Grant Dawson's kryptonite, clearly, or at the very least it was against Bobby Green, okay, but Joe Solecki's got a single knockout on his resume. He's been knocked out more times than he has actually finished his opponents with strikes, okay, so also the vast majority of Dawson's wins are by submission, as are Joe Solecki's. But I don't see Joe Solecki being able to finish a guy like Grant Dawson, who has very strong top pressure, has never been submitted, despite fighting guys with better grappling credentials than somebody like a Joe Solecki. So I am going to go Grant Dawson to actually get a submission here. I think Solecki's going to get beat up a bit on the ground, just being a little too willing to play guard. Kind of like we saw him against Jakar Close get slammed, okay, knocked out because he was trying very hard to fish for submissions. I feel like he'll do something similar to that against Grant Dawson. I think Grant Dawson probably hurts him a little bit with some ground and pound, and then is able to pass his guard, find the choke eventually. Moving up the card, 2, Cesar Almeida versus Roman Kopylov. I'm going to go with Roman Kopylov all fucking day, okay? First of all, this guy's no Fluffy Hernandez. 2 completely different styles. Nobody's going to be able to match Fluffy Hernandez's pace, at least at middleweight, not in the way that he does it, okay? Also, Cesar Almeida here is a kickboxer, which seriously plays into the game of Roman Kopylov, okay? As I said, bro's not Fluffy Hernandez, so I'm not worried about him constantly spamming takedowns, you know, but not getting tired fucking ever, and also being able to submit you once he gets you there. Like, Fluffy Hernandez is just very, very good, and Roman Kopylov, up until that fight, had looked phenomenal in his last few. Do you know what I mean? So I think Roman Kopylov seriously fucking decapitates this dude. Bro's record is completely and totally padded. He had a losing record in kickboxing anyways, right? Anytime he fought high-level competition in Glory, he lost to them. Also, just 2 MMA fights ago, Bro fought a guy that was 5-28. Before that, 0-0. Like, his last opponent on the Contender Series, if I'm not mistaken, was the best opponent that he's fought to date, and he's not that experienced. Do you know what I mean? So, very padded record, not overly successful in his one discipline before MMA, and I just think that I think his style feeds into Kopylov, and I think Kopylov is gonna just destroy this dude. So Roman Kopylov by late round 1 knockout. Okay, moving up the card, 2 Randy Brown versus Elisa Zaleski dos Santos. I'm going to Elisa Zaleski dos Santos here, who I think is super underrated. Handed Benoit Saint Denis his first loss, obviously. Had that draw with Rinat Fakhretdinov at a time when Rinat Fakhretdinov was looking like an absolute monster. Dude's tough as nails, can take a beating, and then still come back and give it to you the very next round. Has a ton of really good experience. He's got dude, I mean, he knocked out Sean Strickland. You know what I mean? Like, this guy's resume has aged very well over time. Also, I think he's going to be able to hurt Randy Brown on the feet, who sometimes can also, maybe much like Jake Matthews, appear to be a bit chinny. Not that the guy gets finished a whole lot, but he'll get hit, he'll get wobbled, he'll get dropped or what have you, and it's just not a good look oftentimes. And Elisa Zaleski dos Santos, if he has you hurt, he is super dangerous. I could see him finishing it off with a submission. Now, I wouldn't be totally surprised if this fight goes the distance, and I wouldn't even be totally surprised if Randy Brown, for most of the time, was actually winning these rounds, right? But I think that Elisa Zaleski dos Santos will have the more impactful moments of the fight or the rounds and win the rounds over Randy Brown, kind of stealing them away from him, right? Because Elisa Zaleski dos Santos, despite still looking phenomenal at his age and, you know, being dangerous and good everywhere, hasn't gotten a finish in a good long while. So I could see it making its way to a decision with Elisa Zaleski dos Santos coming out on top. But either way, dude, I got Dos Santos over Randy Brown all day. Randy Brown just kind of, you know, he looked good last time out against Muslim Salikov, obviously. Big first round finish, but I don't know, dude. Not all that trustworthy for me, especially against another very dangerous guy like Dos Santos here. So, Elisa Zaleski dos Santos, probably unanimous decision, but I could potentially see him hurting Randy Brown on the feet and then finishing it off with a submission after that. Moving up the card, 2, Jailton Almeida versus Alexander Romanov, okay? I'm going Jailton Almeida. I'm going to be honest, I was kind of torn on this one, going back and forth. Now, I picked Curtis Blades to beat Jailton Almeida last time out, and I feel like he did kind of get exposed in that fight. But Curtis Blades is way more athletic, way less obese, okay, than Alexander Romanov. Also, while Romanov is also a very good grappler in his own right, he did get subbed by Volkov. Now, there were a few funny things in that fight, if I remember correctly. Volkov obviously was trying to keep it at distance and strike with Romanov. I remember there being a time where Volkov grabbed the fence, pretty good too, which actually stopped the takedown. Ref didn't notice it. Shit continued, and then, you know, obviously Volkov ended up winning that fight. But even with that being said, even Volkov, a guy beating you on the feet and what have you, if he's able to sub you when your whole shit is supposed to be grappling, like Volkov subbing Tai Tuivasa, I understand. Do you know what I mean? They're both not very good grapplers, or they're both not the best grapplers at least, so that one kind of checks out. Whereas Romanov, his whole game is grappling. Vast majority of his wins, are by submission. And he was able to, you know, Volkov was able to get on his back and sub him, which is just not a great look, okay? My only problem is when I imagine how this fight, like, gets to the mat, I'm kind of having a hard time figuring it out, because I'm thinking, well, I don't know that Romanov's going to want to take down Jailton Almeida, even though that is basically Romanov's entire game, okay? Also, I don't think Jailton Almeida is going to be able to just shoot on Romanov, because I think it would look something similar to how it did against Curtis Blades, where he wasn't really able to get the takedown, and then he just kind of got Donkey Kong smashed out. Do you know what I mean? But I guess if it stays on the feet, I'm going to give the slight edge to Almeida, so that's kind of what I'm banking on here, is not really having to see how the grappling plays out all that much. But I could see Jailton Almeida getting it done that way, whether it be on the feet or a later submission right after Romanov's kind of gassed, because he is morbidly obese, okay? Do you know what I mean? And Jailton Almeida clearly in much better shape than Romanov, and yeah, so I'm going to go with Jailton Almeida to get it done. Not sure how. As I said, I'm kind of torn on this fight. Not overly confident in this pick, but either way, dude. Moving up the card, too. Kevin Holland versus Michael OLEKSIEJZUK. I'm going Michael OLEKSIEJZUK, okay? First, I never like seeing Kevin Holland fight at middleweight. He's just not a middleweight. And second, in this part of Kevin Holland's career, not only is he pretty inconsistent, but also he's kind of got this thing going where, like, if shit isn't going his way, he kind of just, like, he's okay either getting a moral victory and not getting finished, or he kind of just, like, he laughs it up and acts as though he doesn't give a shit, or it's all just kind of fun and games, and then that way he doesn't have to cope with the actual, like, it's like he's already coping with the loss before the loss actually happens. Like, he knows that the fight is trending in that direction, so he's just gonna start dealing with it inside the cage rather than try and do something crazy. Do you know what I mean? Like, I feel like there were moments, I know Michael Venom Page is a very frustrating opponent to stand in front of, but I feel like there were things that he was doing, that he was having success early on, that he got away from, and I think that there were things that he could have switched up in order to have success against Michael Venom Page, but by the time that, like, he just he wasn't having it anymore, and you could just tell, and he wasn't trying all that hard, or at the very least he's making it appear as though he's not trying all that hard, because then he can kind of play it off as well. I wasn't really trying, or I was just out there having fun, or whatever the fuck. So I don't really like seeing that from a guy when I'm thinking about who I'm gonna pick to win. Okay. Also, Michael Oleksiejczuk is a legit middleweight. He has finishes at light heavyweight, okay? This guy, I don't think he could make welterweight if his life depended on it. Maybe. It would be probably the worst fucking weight cut of his life. But he's a clean technical striker, wins most of his fights by knockout. Now, that being said, okay, he has been submitted quite a few times. And I could see if Kevin Holland wins this fight, it will be like a Darce or some shit, okay? But to be fair to Michael Oleksiejczuk, he's getting submitted against guys that are like big middleweights, a lot stronger than Kevin Holland, a lot more willing to like just shoot, close the distance, and go for a takedown and shit like that. Like, I just don't think that Kevin Holland's going to be able to really muscle Michael Oleksiejczuk around enough to get him into a position like that. And I think that as long as it's at range, I think we see Michael Oleksiejczuk kind of chew the legs of Kevin Holland up. I think we see him do work at range, and I think we see Kevin Holland kind of look how Kevin Holland's been looking, and he's kind of just feet very close together, flat-footed, walking up to his opponent, not really doing a whole lot, just kind of taking a bit of a beating, being content in not getting finished. Okay, so I will be going with Oleksiejczuk. Holland's a hard guy to finish. The dude is tough as nails, to, give him some flowers at least. So I could see it going to a decision of Michael Oleksiejczuk taking away a unanimous decision victory over Kevin Holland. Moving up the card to the co-main event. We breezed through these. I do apologize. It's been a minute since I've taken the time to do a picks video, but either way, dude. Sean Strickland versus Paulocosta. Okay, I'm going Sean Strickland, and I think Sean Strickland wins a unanimous decision or a very late round TKO stoppage, whether it be in the 4th or the 5th round. Now, Paulocosta obviously looked very good against Robert Whittaker, considering he has pulled out probably 10 times in the last few years from fights. Also, before the Whittaker fight, he looked okay against an old Luke Rockhold who was going to be retiring that night. Do you know what I mean? So I think it was a little bit shocking seeing him do that well against Robert Whittaker. In all seriousness, I understand there's going to be people out there that say, well, no, he's the Chad. Of course, we knew he was going to do well and fucking whatever, dude. But when you looked at who Whittaker had been fighting and beating compared to Paulocosta, and how many times Paulocosta's pulled out from fights and shit, I feel like nobody would have seriously picked Paulocosta to win that fight. But he almost did, okay? That being said, Whittaker, I feel like, ended up, in hindsight, being a very good stylistic matchup for somebody like Paulocosta, who kind of just throws, like, big shots that he's not setting up all that well. Obviously, the wheel kick that landed in the first round there, that hurt Rob, landed damn near perfectly. Problem is, I don't think Sean Strickland's going to be the kind of guy to stand there and get... When Robert Whittaker wants to engage with you, he bounces inside range. Okay, he's always got his right hand right by his face. He's trying to land like a left hook. He'll land a couple jabs, left hook maybe. Most of his punching attacks come off of his left hand. And then he hops back out of range. So he's either all the way in or all the way out. All the way out is like the perfect place for something like that wheel kick in the first round to land on Whittaker. Okay. Sean Strickland, on the other hand, right, is going to walk into range, and that's where he's going to be the rest of the fight. Sean Strickland's he's not ever at kicking range. He's not all the way out with his hands completely down by his waist, waiting to kind of hop in, just feinting, right? He will get right in front of you. He will stand right in front of you in that Philly shell stance. And Paulocosta, a guy who doesn't really set up his shots, doesn't have a super sophisticated feinting game, doesn't have the cleanest of really anything, right? Like, the guy's got very nice body kicks, which I think he'll actually be able to have quite a bit of success using against Sean Strickland. But regardless, you know, not this overly sophisticated striker, kind of just relies on his barrages, because he's not even that big of a power puncher either. It's like always a barrage that ends up finishing an opponent, which, by the way, speaking of, he's not done in like 5 years. Okay, so I don't think that he's just gonna all of a sudden start finishing top level middleweights, who, not to mention, are the most defensively sound striker in the fucking UFC. Okay, and Sean Strickland. So I think Sean Strickland's gonna walk in front of Paulo Costa. I think he's gonna 1-2 him. For the most part, just keep it a jab, most likely, dude. Box Costa's face off. I think that every time Costa tries to load up and hit him with some shit, it's going to get off shoulder, parried, or deflected, or what have you. Whatever Sean Strickland does. And that's that. And I think that it'll be not the most entertaining fight, aside from maybe a little bit of Paulo Costa showboating. I think Strickland will probably bust up Costa's nose and shit like that. But I don't think we're going to see anybody gets severely hurt, as I said, until maybe much later in the fight, 4th or 5th round, which I think that actually helps Sean Strickland quite a bit. Gives him more time to kind of soften Costa up and then eventually land those finishing shots. But, you know, as I said, Costa's not a giant one-hitter quitter type dude. He needs a barrage to finish his opponent off. Last opponent he finished was Uriah Hall, right? Before that was Johnny Hendricks. We're talking a long time ago. We're talking dudes that were... In Johnny Hendricks, a fat welterweight at the time. We're talking Uriah Hall, a guy who, you know, very inconsistent and also a little bit chinny at times. Not the best representation of what he can do against top-level opponents today. Whereas Sean Strickland, in my opinion, beat Dricus du Plessis. Obviously, beat Israel Adesanya. You know, very good defensively speaking. And as long as he doesn't get hit, this is the problem. A lot of people will have a problem with Sean Strickland's fight style, because they'll say it's boring or whatever, dude, because he's only landing 1-2s. And oftentimes it'll bother me, because I'm like, fuck, man, if you could just do a little bit more, sit down on your shots a little bit more, you'd probably win these rounds a lot more convincingly, and we wouldn't have split decisions like the one against Jared Cannonier or the one against Dricus du Plessis. But as long as you're not able to hit him, dude, that's enough to win the round. Do you know what I mean? If he's going to hit you with jabs for 5 minutes straight and you can't hit him cleanly at all, that's all he needs. So that is what it is. And I think that Costa will probably have a few moments early on, or have moments that, you know, are close moments. I don't even think he'll have a whole lot of success. I think he'll have moments where he's close to having success, and I think that'll get the crowd going a little bit. But I think in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th round, I think he's going to be exhausted. I think he's going to be really fucking frustrated from having a guy like Sean Strickland stand just, you know, an arm's reach away from him, and he just can't touch him. Do you know what I mean? So I'm going Sean Strickland. As I said, unanimous decision, or 5th round, you know, late 4th round, TKO or what have you, over Paulo Costa. Moving up the card to the main event, Islam Makhachev versus Dustin Poirier. I have to pick Islam Makhachev here. As much as I would love to see Dustin Poirier get the job done, I just think that he's not going to be able to. One dude, guy, I mean, do I even need to explain this one, honestly? Do you know what I mean? So there's a few things Dustin Poirier has going for him. Now, Dustin Poirier is phenomenal against southpaws, okay? Both with his outside leg kick, right? His calf kick attack against southpaws, he's very good with, because he doesn't usually get to use that kick when he's facing against an orthodox fighter. And you see this against McGregor. He's also very good at checking the kick against a southpaw opponent, as seen against McGregor. Also, every single time Michael Chandler switched into southpaw, his leg would get chewed the fuck up. He would start to land beautiful combinations from that when his opponent would be in southpaw as well. Now, the problem is that Michael Chandler is not the striker that Islam Makhachev is, nor is he Islam Makhachev has a way better fucking fight IQ as well. Okay, Islam Makhachev also is a much better submission grappler than Michael Chandler, and Islam Makhachev also, here's the problem for me, dude. Dustin Poirier, in my opinion, needs to pressure Islam Makhachev pretty heavily, because, you know, you want to kind of take the threat of the takedown away while also being able to land your own offense, while also not being, you know, concerned about overextending and getting shot on immediately. So you're going to want to back Islam up or have him constantly moving laterally or what have you. The problem is that style of striking that Dustin Poirier could implement plays into Islam Makhachev, okay? Because Islam Makhachev is much better, much cleaner, much more technical on the back foot than he is moving forward when he's striking. And he's very clean when he's on the back foot, when he's countering, and what have you. Okay, so that kind of plays into Islam Makhachev's striking game. Not to mention, Dustin Poirier is best when he's on the back foot, bro. You know, he might have a violent barrage after he gets the dude hurt, but typically speaking, the punch that hurts his opponent is one in which he's off the back up against the cage, off the back foot, you know, check right hook or what have you, a counter shot. So it's going to be odd. See, you know, I'm curious to see what Dustin Poirier's game plan is, but, you know, whether or not he's going to want to pressure, because that's not really something that he's super comfortable doing unless he's got his opponent hurt, right? But in order to allow, it's because if he lets Islam be the one that leads to the dance, the one to push him forward, then he is going to be open up for a takedown, and he'll be up against the fence, high elbow guard, like defending, you know, punches or kicks or what have you, and then Islam will just shoot underneath of him. And if that's the case, then I don't think Dustin Poirier is good. You know, I think he's got a tough night ahead of him. Also, you know, the guillotine, whatever, up in the air as well. We'll see what happens with that one. Islam Makhachev, I think, is just super. I think his striking is super underrated. Obviously, he's very good in the grappling department as well. His takedowns, his trips, like everything about it is very good. And I feel as though he can, you know, maybe not to the point where you're going to get reckless or to the point where all of a sudden it's too late, but I feel like he can stand with Dustin Poirier if he feels the need or want to. And then if things start to go sideways, I feel like he's got the takedown and the grappling in his back pocket. And I feel like, you know, it'll look very similar to Dustin Poirier's other title fights, unfortunately. You know what I mean? Where Charles Oliveira strangles him. You know, Dustin had a lot of good moments on the feet early on in that fight, and then he got slowly broken down, knees to the body and shit like that in the clinch or whatever. And the problem is too, is like Dustin Poirier's kicking game is not that great. He can land that calf kick against his opponents, but he's got like his hip flexibility is not great. So when he throws a kick to the body or to the head, everything kind of looks like it's a front kick up the middle, because he's not really able to like swing his hips out that way. And you know, so he's going to have to get in relatively close to do damage on Islam Makhachev, in which case Islam Makhachev can kind of just shoot if he needs to, or grab a hold of him in the clinch and then go from there. So I would love to see Dustin Poirier get it done. I would love to see it. It would be fucking amazing. But with that being said, I am going to go Islam Makhachev. Now, you know, I don't know that I would bet on Islam Makhachev. The odds are pretty fucking crazy. But either way, dude, minus 675. I apologize, dude. I didn't even fucking bother with this shit. But either way, dude, like and subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. See you in the next video. Bye-bye.